Good afternoon, a very warm welcome. My name is Andrew Wrobel, and I am the founding partner at Emerging Europe and the leader of its Tech Emerging Europe Advocates community, part of a global network of tech advocates. Emerging Europe's mission is to drive the social, economic, and democratic development of 23 countries in the region we call Emerging Europe. One of the ways we do this is by initiating debates about the region's future and encouraging the sharing of best practices and close cooperation within the region. And this expert session is designed to do exactly that. Digitizing services helps governments meet public expectations and become more resilient, foresightful, and efficient, especially in challenging times such as a global pandemic like COVID-19. It is clear that the task is complex, but a tried and true approach can help the public sector move faster and more efficiently. That is why it is critical to exchange experiences and best practices to develop a better future. Today, we have been joined by the European Commission, UiPath, a leading robotic process automation company, and several public sector automation pioneers from across the Emerging Europe region who will be sharing their successes, challenges, and goals while building a digital nation. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker today, Carlos Torrecilla Salinas, the head of the Digital Economy Unit at the European Commission's Joint Research Center. Carlos, over to you.
And good afternoon. My name is Carlos Torrecilla, and I'm the head of the Digital Economy Unit at the European Commission's Joint Research Center. First, allow me to start with an anecdote to set the scene. Last year, I moved to Sevilla to take up my current post at the Joint Research Center. To register my car locally, I had to appear in person at an office several times and present physical copies of all the documentation. Exactly this is still the reality today for many European citizens when interacting with the public sector. It requires showing up physically and dealing with paper copies of documents. In the past years, until 2020, some of us might have found this inconvenient, but most European citizens probably took it for granted. Then COVID came, and suddenly, going to an office to interact with civil servants became a health risk. This, I believe, has led us to two important realizations. One, the importance of public services and how difficult our lives are if we don't have access to them. And two, the need to rethink how we organize and provide them. Let me start with the importance of public services. From giving out birth certificates, administering unemployment benefits, to planning cities and neighborhoods, our European way of life could not be imagined without essential services provided by the public sector. These are services that, for the most part, cannot be provided by the market, or for which we as societies have decided that they should not be provided by the market. This monopoly of providing public services puts great responsibility on the public sector. Public services have the potential to significantly improve the daily lives of citizens, unlock dormant economic potential, while strengthening accountability, transparency, and democratic governance. Many public services do fulfill these promises, while others fall short. And this brings me to the way how we organize and provide public services, and the role of digital technologies. Digital technologies are certainly not the only ingredient for innovating public services, but they play an absolutely crucial role. Digital technologies can, for example, help make the public sector more efficient. This does not necessarily lead to overall budget savings. More commonly, digital technologies and automation can free up human resources that can then be used for more meaningful tasks. Digitalizing the public sector can improve administrative processes and make the public sector more effective. It can do so, for example, by tapping into more and better data for service provision. Digital technologies also show great potential for increasing transparency. For example, through open data portals, or improved public participation ranging from consultation to co-design and decision-making. Lastly, digital technologies can also benefit citizens and businesses at individual level. They can, for example, improve accessibility to services, make them more user-friendly, and speed up lengthy processes. We have known about the potential of digital technologies for innovating public services for many years, but it is the tragic experience of the COVID pandemic and the hardships during the lockdowns that made digitalizing public services a necessity and pushed it to the top of the policy agenda. In the European Union, there is one very effective indicator to show how much this topic has gained in importance: the Recovery and Resilience Facility. The Recovery and Resilience Facility is the EU's response to the crisis to help it emerge stronger and more resilient. Until 2026, 672.5 billion of euros will be made available in loans and grants to support the reforms and investments undertaken by member states. At least 20% of these funds have to be used to foster the digital transformation of our economies and societies. Digitally enabled public sector modernization is one of the 7 flagship areas of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. Let me give you an example of what that means concretely. Under the Recovery and Resilience Facility, one of the member states might receive about 25 billion of euros. Based on the draft plan these member states officially submitted to the Commission, more than a quarter of this money will be spent to digitalize public services. That means that this particular member state will invest more than 6 billion until 2026 to digitalize public services, and other countries are proposing similar investments in their plans. Those are unprecedented sums and represent a great opportunity for the countries of the EU, and indirectly also for other countries in the world. But at the same time, these large amounts also come with great responsibilities to spend this money well. At the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, we are working to support this transformation through independent evidence for policy making. And we believe that evidence policy making will be crucial to make sure we get it right. I'd like to highlight some recommendations that our research has produced and that we have summarized in a policy brief titled Public Sector Modernization for EU Recovery and Resilience. The first point I'd like to highlight from our research is that we need to always keep in mind why we are innovating public services. Using digital technologies in public service is not an end in itself, but a way to create public value for our citizens and businesses. Secondly, I want to remind us that many of the technologies we are talking about for innovating public services are already mature and tested in the private sector. However, adopting them in the public sector comes with its own set of challenges. We need to make sure that the use of digital technologies in the public sector is transformative, impactful, but also ethical and democratic. Thirdly, our research emphasizes that innovating public services with digital technologies is a cross-cutting task. A cross-cutting task for the whole public sector that requires effort to create enabling regulations and policies, agile public management, and the right skills and knowledge for civil servants. These points sum up very concisely what our completed and ongoing research suggests. But of course, there are still many questions that remain open and that have to be addressed. Let me focus on a few, just to give you an idea of the main lines along which we are thinking at the GRC and in my unit at the moment. One line of research that will remain very relevant is interoperability. With large amounts of money spent to digitalize public services all across Europe, we need to make sure we do not build new silos. Also, we need to better understand the effects of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence on interoperability. Another important question we will need to investigate is the role of the citizens for co-creating, co-designing, and co-implementing public services, especially for emergent technologies. Because we still have a step learning curve ahead of us as societies. We need to understand how to involve citizens better. This also links to the ethical dimension of, for example, using AI in public services. On a more technical note, while emerging technologies become more mature, we also expect them to increase in complexity. For example, by combining different emerging technologies into one single solution. How this would work and what implications it might have is not yet fully understood. I could continue with this list for quite some more time, but for the sake of time, I will maybe stop here with only one more point that our current research focuses on and that I believe will remain relevant in the future. The digital transformation can only be successful through cooperation. If we cooperate across departmental boundaries, across institutional boundaries, across national borders, and between public and private sector, civil society, and research organizations. As researchers, we need to better understand how to overcome the barriers for cooperation, so that we can support policymakers with solutions and recommendations. I want to thank you for being part of this effort, as researchers, as policymakers, or as practitioners, and hope we will soon have the opportunity to discuss about these topics in a more direct way. Thank you very much for your attention. I wish you a productive and insightful event.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this insight, and apologies for the technical issues that we had in the streaming. I'd like to echo and highlight Carlos's words about cooperation, and I very much hope this expert session will contribute to that. Now, our next speaker, Margareta Casaro. Margareta is the Public Affairs Manager at UiPath. Margareta, the floor is yours. Please share your views on automation with
Thank you so much, Andrew, and our partners at Emerging Europe for bringing us all at today's event. My name is Margarita Quesaro, and I'm a Public Affairs Manager at UiPath. And today I would like to talk about the role of digital technologies, such as robotic process automation and artificial intelligence, in stimulating economic recovery, modernizing public administrations, and doing this all while helping enable future growth. But first, let's talk about automation and what we mean by that. We are all familiar with the term, right? Although the technology that I will talk about today is very different to traditional automation. UiPath's automation platform combines robotic process automation, computer vision, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and process discovery capabilities to support organizations in scaling their digital business operations. In short, this kind of automation operates in the digital world, and you will hear us talk about software robots, or simply put, robots. But what are the benefits of using this type of technology, and why does it matter? Well, the plan is to rethink the way we work and do it for the better. Because automation emulates human actions performed on computers to liberate workers from mundane and repetitive tasks that are less productive, to help them enable and leverage their unique qualities, their unique capabilities that only humans have, such as creativity, abstract thinking, strategizing, dealing with ambiguity, you name it, communicating, driving innovation, and using their passion. And UiPath's platform is designed to remove the friction that exists across employees and departments by improving transparency, promoting collaboration, and allowing people to allocate their time and attention for work that matters, one that is not robotic. But the robot's ability to emulate human behavior allows organizations to leverage our platform to address countless use cases, from simple to very complex ones. And let me give you a couple of examples. During COVID-19, the banking industry was overwhelmed with requests for postponement of loans, as we've seen. And one of our customers used an automation solution that integrates the capabilities of both chatbots and UiPath software robots to process requests to postpone such bank loan installments. The automated solution allowed to cut down the processing time of a single request from 10 minutes to just 20 seconds. In the public sector, the Moravian Silesian Regional Authority in the Czech Republic saved 8,000 hours by implementing automation to help speed up the processing of green boiler grants to almost 2 million people. And by replacing high-polluting boilers with green models, they also improved the air quality for the surrounding areas. The project actually received an award recognized for excellence 5-star by the European Foundation for Quality Management in 2019. And these are just two examples, right? We believe that the power of our platform is only limited by the use cases that human users can conceive. So just imagine the multitude of use cases that exist out there. If you think about repetitive, high volume tasks that you perform on your computer. But going further into our today's topic, a fundamental question arises. How can we leverage technology, and more specifically automation, to help drive economic recovery, to enable the digital transition and modernize the public sector? In our experience, by leveraging robotic process automation and artificial intelligence technologies, public sector organizations can serve their citizens better. They can reduce bureaucracy, they can gain more internal productivity and efficiency, and they can also help the public sector workforce manage increased workloads. And we've seen that during COVID-19. We've seen that in hospitals. We've seen that in labor authorities. We've seen that with stimulus packages. It's a matter of time that we have to address, and automation helps exactly do that, bring efficiency and incredible time resources. And this was also included in the guidelines to the member state that were issued by the European Commission in the context of the Recovery and Resilience Facility. The Commission included there are several examples for digital investments that can help drive digital dimension of the facility, including the modernization of the public administration by using key digital enablers, improving decision-making, and public services that can be leveraged by the use and the capabilities of digital technologies that include artificial intelligence, as well as business process reengineering, among many others. Because here's the thing, when you implement automation, you also redesign the process to make it more efficient, to make it, if it's broken, to make it more lean. So this is another important component of implementing automation. And the benefits that this technology offers in the public sector, can be seen at multiple levels. Let me give you an example. The development of electronic and automated public services can relieve the public administration staff that's currently involved in receiving and managing citizens' various requests for a series of manual activities that consume a large part of their working time. The time resources released can be used for other activities. You can use that resource to interact more with citizens. And at the same time, with automation, you will have more streamlined internal processes, you will gain productivity, you can help the public sector workforce manage the increased workload, and you can also improve the citizen satisfaction because they will benefit from a public service that has an increased quality, that has an added value. Another reason for why automation is uniquely suited to be used in the public sector organization is because it is very compatible and it integrates easily with legacy applications. And it's not only legacy applications, it's also the fact that it can be integrated with innovative types of technologies that allow the use of chatbots and natural language processing in an integration that extends the support to help citizens, update requests, submit requests to their authorities, reduce waiting time, and it all increases user interaction and satisfaction. And it's also easy to track automation projects because you can follow a specific set of parameters. You can see exactly how many requests were processed by a robot, how many successful processes were implemented over time, what's the number of citizens that were served in a certain amount of time, number of hours saved. This is very easy to be tracked and measure success. The implementation time is also a critical component because automation is a type of technology that can be deployed in a matter of weeks, not months or years. And this has allowed us to implement very, very fast automation during COVID-19, both in the public sector and in the private sector, as I was just mentioning earlier. But we also asked citizens their views on automation in the public sector to get that 360-degree, right? And the results were extremely interesting. Let me show you a slide with what we've learned from a study conducted in Romania earlier this year. You can see here that over 90% of the participants in the survey, they think that automation can be a solution to improve public administration services by reducing operating costs, allocating more time to citizens, avoiding human error in processing requests, something that is oftentimes overlooked, but it can be a very important aspect if you think about the area of public services. Not receiving a public service at the time that you need it is very important, and it sometimes happens because of very simple errors. And also resolving a large number of requests in a shorter time, more than 55%. So, as we've seen, deploying automation in the public sector can drive a much more broader range of benefits, far beyond cost savings. You can have higher citizen experience, you can have fast claims processing and error-free services, you can have internal productivity, but you can also have increased interoperability, something that we all know is critical, especially looking at the public sector infrastructure at this point. You have the higher job satisfaction. You can use data to improve decision-making. But you can also lay the ground for future digital transformation efforts by integrating other technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. So apart from the fact that the technology itself, the platform itself uses AI, machine learning, it also integrates, as I mentioned earlier, with both legacy applications and more innovative technologies. But as shown by the European Commission's Digital Economy and Society Index report, all CEE countries, with the exception of Estonia, have an index below 50. This is both a challenge, but also an opportunity for the region. Because if we continue the debureaucratization and digitalization agenda of the public sector, we can make very strong steps towards having a more modern public administration and to improve the overall quality of life. And we've seen how automation can help drive that. Together with other technologies, the impact will only maximize. Another very important element that I would like to bring as my final remark is the fact that we should not forget that digital transformation needs to have humans at its heart. So we need to make everything we can to increase access to digital skills, to democratize access both to the technology but also to the learning pathways. And we should collaborate so that we can bring digital literacy to as many citizens as we can, both basic digital skills as well as advanced digital skills. So without further ado, I would like to thank you very much. It was an honor to be here, and I wish you a wonderful event. Enjoy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Margareta, for circling back to that cooperation aspect again and to the need to improve our digital skills. Like I said earlier, we have invited public sector automation pioneers who will now share their experiences with us in a series of one-on-one fireside chats. If you have questions to the experts, please share them in the stage chat on your right-hand side and pick Q&A. And after the series of fireside conversations, we are going to invite all the experts to a Q&A. I will now start this part by inviting our moderator, Samuel Berg, Senior Host and Interim Managing Editor at Real Vision. Sam, it's great to have you with us today. Over to you.
Well, Andrew, I always like speaking with Emerging Europe and Tech Emerging Europe advocates, but I'm particularly excited because this topic about automation in the public sector is actually something that I've always been incredibly passionate about. But now, because of COVID and the pandemic, I have felt it in my own life the way that so many of us have. The troubles that we've had here in the UK and the successes that I've seen in other places. And while you, Andrew, have been successfully able to use your vaccination card on an app, I still have not been able to. So these are the types of conversations that we're going to have today. What works, what doesn't, what's successful, and what the path to being successful is. So let's jump right into it. I want to welcome our first guest. Now, the only thing I'll need a little bit of help on today isn't the topics, but quite possibly the pronunciation. So if I get somebody's name wrong, please do correct me. But I want to start by asking Marta Arosowska-Tomovska, the Director of the Public Administration Reform Team, Office of the Prime Minister of Serbia. You are on camera now. Did I get your name almost right or mostly wrong? Marta, I'm just going to ask you to unmute. I think you might be on mute, so take your time there. There, and now you can answer that question. Mostly wrong or a little right?
100% right.
Oh, wow. I just try it in Spanish and make it happen that way. Let's get into this discussion right away. Tell me what the biggest challenges have been for your country and for the departments that you oversee during the time of COVID, but then we can back out and look at it larger. But I really want to start on this topic because this is what we're all thinking and experiencing, some of us for the very first time, digitization of our records this way.
Thank you very much, Samuel. Thank you, Andrew, for inviting me to this panel. This is a topic that is basically my life. And I would really like to share experiences that we have here in Serbia with the digital transformation, especially during the crisis. So I will start with something that we've done like almost 4 years ago, when the government with the Prime Minister Ana Brnabić took the digital transformation and e-government. Now you can say we can talk about e-government like digital government or smart government, however, as the #1 priority. So this meant that the crisis really showed that these investments in human capacity, in finances, whatever was invested, paid off big time. During the crisis, we had really kind of moved our lives online. Totally and entirely moved our lives online. Whether this is good or bad, I don't know. I have some concerns
It has its good
about
parts,
that.
it has its bad parts.
Yeah, it has good part and bad part, but basically schools, the classes were totally online. The entire generations enrolled from kindergarten to universities online. We have handled the vaccination process using the latest technology, from expressing interest to get the shot, to distribution of vaccines, to receiving green certificates and tests results online, to doing everything related to personal documents or paying taxes or handling properties. So it was really something that we...
And Martha, I'm wondering, what % of this was already online? And what were the challenges that you really faced in getting all this information online?
Well, it was like, I don't know, 60% online. I've never measured that, but this is like more than a half. It was already online, but the other part, we worked days and nights. Like really, we worked days and nights. The entire tech sector was working hard, but not only the government institutions, but also the private sector, the company, startup community, innovators, everybody. So it was real collaboration. So the challenges that we have was basically, there are many building blocks. When you talk about digital government, the building blocks are enormous, from infrastructure, meaning, I don't know, this X-Road on interoperability platform, to AID, to payment solutions, to e-delivery, electronic delivery of whatever you applied for to receive it. So in infrastructure, in terms of broadband, that is really important to have. Procurement was kind of a problem. Basically, when we talk about innovation and digital transformation, procurement is a little bit problem because it takes time to do that, and we have to be very fast and very flexible. And the adoption of digital services was one of the main challenges before the crisis. After the crisis, that wasn't a challenge anymore, because you have to, feed the entire population into the future societies. And I think that we managed that. And I think that digitalization and digital government has become the most spoken subject here in Serbia, and everybody is proud of what we've done. And it became a matter of national pride, if I may say.
So I'm interested when you say adoption, I assume that you mean the adoption by the citizens was the most challenging part. I suppose because people just didn't have a reason before, and COVID finally gave them a reason to know that this would be a much easier, or the only way possible, because they couldn't go in person. Why do you think there was so much hesitation before? Was it just because it simply hadn't been done before, the age of the population? What were some of the main roadblocks to the general population adopting this type of technology?
Well, it depends on different generations. So the young people, they of course, they adopted it even from the beginning. But so we have different categories of citizens that were not that much into tech, that are afraid of technology, that maybe if they, we were doing in the same time some kind of training, and volunteers help older people to cope with technology, because it was time when they should have know how to buy something online. For example, they have to know how to use their phones to connect with their dearest. They have to know how to use e-commerce application, and the adoption rate was basically because they have the flexibility before to do it offline, and they were hesitant to use the technology. But when this crisis struck, they didn't have a choice, and then for us, for the people that are leading digital transformation of the government, it's, I don't know if it is politically correct to say, but it was this crisis was a dream come true, because what we achieved massive digitalization on services and massive adoption rates, and it will continue. It will continue. So people are not getting benefit all the way.
Can you give me some idea of the numbers that we're talking about? What percent of people had a public health app on their phone today, or accessing it before versus today? What are some of these standout numbers that I'm sure you have?
Now they have, all of them have. Like we have 10,000 new customers.
100%?
But almost. Because everything related to the crisis, to the vaccination, was online basically. So you have to apply for the vaccine online, although there were call centers, but then again, I mean, there have to be guided process, let's say, to apply online. 10,000 new customers almost every day. E-citizens, we call them e-citizens. We have 10,000 e-citizens almost every day, and it's going like this. And when we were analyzing the number of transactions on our service bus, the X-road, the infrastructure, it has gone, I don't know if you see me, it was going like this for like past years, and now it is like this. So wow. It is really, the trend is unbelievable.
Okay, so I'm sure lots of people are in the audience wondering, well, how can we do the same? How can we make a model out of what Serbia did? And I'm certain that automation was a huge part of that process. So tell me, what were the challenges and what were the big successes of automation? If someone's watching this and saying, all right, Marta, what can I do? What would you tell them, especially when it comes to automation?
Well, at the beginning, when we started this digital transformation, we were thinking how to bypass the red tape and the bureaucracy. And we started to, let's say, automate the first and the last step in that journey, which means you can apply for a service online and you can receive the service online when it comes to some documents, licenses, and so on. In between, so the workload that agency or agencies have to do in the back office was sometimes not automated, sometimes semi-automated, sometimes fully automated. But the first and the last contact, and when the people really have contact with the government, that they have to do a walk to some agency, to apply, this has been automated. So and that's huge machinery. If you I don't know if you're aware, if we have like 2,000 or 3,000 institutions, and then all of them have to have these building blocks that I mentioned, EIDs, payment systems. Although we have central government institutions that takes care about the whole of a government digitalizing, digital transformation, but still this agency is relatively new. Before that, some agency did have their own systems, so they're not all of them fully integrated. But still, the question is here: how do you go from a situation where you have reactive services, when somebody applies and then you provide service, to proactive services, and now to predictive services, and this is where this automation really makes sense, and we are using it massively now. So
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that basically now we are using that kind of automation when the back office processes are fully automated, especially in the domain of decision making. So this is really going really fast, and we have several use cases also in Serbia, which might be very interesting. And to start with, it was the vaccination process, and it was really interesting because Serbia, I don't know if you are aware, but was one of the few countries that from the beginning of from the beginning when the vaccines were there, we started the vaccination in December 2020, among the first in Europe. we have provided our citizens a so-called buffet of vaccines. So they could have choose which vaccine they want to have out of 4 or 5 different vaccines. So the entire process, how do you distribute when they apply and say, I would like to have that one? It was online, of course. I would like to get that one, and they live in different places. So how do you have these vaccines? How do you distribute? How do you have them on time? Because they cannot stay for a long time. They have been spent, like for example, Pfizer. There's 6 shots in one vaccine, but you cannot, if there are 3 people interested in that small place, you cannot throw it away. You have to organize that. So we use AI for distribution process out of the plane directly to a central warehouse, to local warehouses, and so on and so on. So that was a really interesting orchestration that we did, but that's related to vaccines. But we also did some great things using AI. For example, during the crisis, there was a project that we called My First Salary. So we have to provide jobs for unemployed people that lost their jobs during the crisis, and there was a huge AI platform for matchmaking the demand side and supply side, and there are really great examples that are taking place.
Well, Marta, I think you've set the bar very high for the rest of our conversations. I want to keep you there because we want to bring you back in for the Q&A. But I think really one of the key takeaways for me listening to you speak is that investment before things got tough, the vision of the leadership there in Serbia, knowing that this would be a priority. And so often what we hear, it may cost more upfront, but it will cost you much less in the long haul. So congratulations to you on this success, and thank you for telling us about the challenges. And I want to keep you there, but for the moment, I want to bring in our next panelist, and that's Lacra Miora Koresh, the General Director, President for the National Agency of Payments and Social Inspection of Romania. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm interested to hear your response to what you just heard there in Serbia and how things were different or similar, or situations were unique there in Romania. Your mute button is on, so I'll give you a chance just to look at the bottom of your screen and unmute, and go ahead. Welcome to the conversation. So we still have you on mute. Don't worry, you're not the first one. If you just look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a mute button that you should be able to unmute. That's the nature of these types of... There we go. I can hear you now, I think. Go ahead.
Okay, hello. Thank you for inviting me here to this event. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Samuel. I am the general manager, as you said, of an agency which is doing the social benefits payments for entire Romania. So we have about 6 million beneficiaries, and during the COVID crisis, which started more than 1 year ago, we received other beneficiaries. So a part of the indemnities and allowances we are paying to children, to poor families, and so on, which is our regular job, we had to do some payments for people, self-employed people, which were in a deep crisis because of the pandemic. So in somewhere in the end of March, we received this task from the government to find solutions to pay them. And this should happen very quickly, in 10 days' time, from the moment they apply with their request on our agency. In this situation, and taking into account all the other specific situation in which we were, all of us, everybody was recommended to stay at home, but we should go somehow in the office and find solutions for a new job, actually. We decided to make a process digitized and automated. So we started to have discussions, and long story short, in 1 month time, we succeeded to scale to whole Romania. That means to 42 local agencies we have. And the whole process. That means the self-employed person should apply online on a PDF, an intelligent form, and this was the 0 point, the entry point, and they received 10 days later from this moment. They received the money they were entitled to according to the government decisions act. In this period of 10 times, we should do all the necessary verifications, and this was done thanks to some solutions provided us by robot process automation. Like this, we succeeded to have 110,000 requests to be processed in these 10 days, which were compulsory for us to respect in order to make the people suffer less having a certain amount of income. So I have the experience only of this institution. I'm our National Agency for Social Payments, and I'm really very proud we succeeded to do that because it was not an easy task for us, and we had some resistance and some difficult points in that.
If you could go back, or if you could give people tips moving forward, or if somebody else were to take on these types of challenges in your own country, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give them? Top line pieces of advice to making this process faster and to adopting it.
Well, let's say, first of all, I would say to speak loud and to explain very clear, so a good communication process with the people who are going to implement this kind of solutions. This would be the key point, maybe the most important one, because they have to understand every step they have to make, and they have to understand the benefits of that. Because, as I said, we had the resistance, especially because, everybody, but maybe especially the public servant, are afraid of robots, which are rather sci-fi story which cannot be applied to the public sector, and the fear comes from this. If that kind of robots will come instead and make my job, where I am going to be next day. So the first step would be, the first tip would be this one, to explain them that the solution, this kind of solutions, are not going to replace them forever. On the contrary, will easy their job just to make some points, and then they save time for creativity and other human things. Then, secondly, would be take care of your infrastructure, because we discovered in March last year, when the crisis was knocking on the door, that it's a problem. We have a problem with the infrastructure. We have a big country, but we also have a lot of beneficiaries in the countryside, and the access to internet and all other solutions was, let's say, difficult for them. Finally, they succeeded to make somehow and to apply on the internet and on our PDP, intelligent PDPs, but it was so and so. And which would be the third one? The third one would be this: don't be afraid of changing. Actually, is part of the communication. Let's see how the future will look like without so many paper, and to ask them this, and finally wait for the answer, because the answer should surprise all of us.
We don't have much time, but I do just want to ask you about how the automation specifically work. This is what so much of the focus is on from the industry and people looking to duplicate successes. So when you look at the automation, what is one of the big takeaways or the lessons learned from the automation?
The process of automation teach us that from a process which lasts usually 20 to 30 minutes, with the help of the RPA, for instance, which we were using, lasts only 36 seconds. So let's use it in everything. And now we want to increase the complexity of the places where we are using it now. We are still using RPA in solutions in managing COVID answer we are providing to our citizens, but we also want to, and we have already written some projects on that. We didn't stay like this. To put them to all other benefits we are paying, and it's a lot of, as I said, 6 million people, and a lot of money in the back of that.
Well, I want to keep you there because we'll bring you back in for our Q&A. I'll thank you for now. That's been very insightful, particularly about having to think about that human angle of telling people not to fear the robot and how it can help make their lives easier and focus on the more important parts of their job instead of worrying that the robot is going to take their job. So we will see you in a little bit for our Q&A session. And for now, I'd like to bring in Arkadiusz Szechebot. He is the former Chief Technology Officer for Poland's Ministry of Digital Affairs and the current COO of MC2 Innovations. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope I got your name mostly right. You can feel free to correct me, but I'm just interested to also hear what your reaction's been to hearing these voices from Serbia and Romania so far in this discussion.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for inviting me. Thank you, Sam, for having a chance for our conversation right now. And you got it mostly right. It's very challenging. My last name, particularly, it's difficult to read, but don't worry about that. And having an opportunity to share my point of view. Obviously, the challenges with the digitalization of the public administration are quite similar in most of the countries, really. So I would say that the biggest challenge that we've been facing at the time when I was playing a role of the Chief Technology Officer in the Ministry of Digital Affairs was the challenge of overcoming the silos, in the public administration, pulling people together. So on one hand, we were in the very lucky position to have the dedicated ministry, for the digital affairs, which is not the case for many of the countries. And at the same time, there were still individual digitalization /IT functions sitting, in the individual ministries. So pulling the people together, under one strategy, under one umbrella, this is something that we've been paying a lot of attention to. We've been spending a lot of time on it, and that was one of the key challenges that we had at that time. Obviously, there is always a fear of the digitalization. This is something new. People don't like new things, so we've heard that, from the ladies before, and this is just a usual thing. And I think we, as a people, we like our habits. We like to keep the things as they were before. So changing anything, always, you hit the resistance. You hear this fear of people, and being, I would say, staying on the course is something that you need to embed in your life. When you are trying to be successful in the digitalization of the public space in general.
I want to talk about an app that you helped design before, and the way that I understand it is that there were a lot of digital services, if I'm not mistaken, driver's license, for instance. So I want to see how you drew on that, and I'm curious to know how you think the pandemic has changed those types of services. I would imagine it's made people more readily available, or more readily willing, rather, to accept them.
Right. So the application you are mentioning is indeed Citizen, Mobile Citizen. We've decided to design a solution that would allow people to get rid of all documents they need to keep, with them in their pockets, in their wallets, in the traditional form. So it wasn't only intended to resolve the problem of the driving license, for example, but also the national ID, the document that we have in Poland. I know in many countries it's not present, but in Poland we have national ID document. Also, the car papers, for example, and many other documents that you need, in the daily life when you want to deal with the public space, but not only actually. So
when did Poland make this decision to start using this app and start investing in designing this app?
So it was in 2017 when we started the project. The initial idea was there before. It was the 2015-16, but the first version of the application was launched in 2017.
So I assume that gave you a big heads up, but I'm curious to know, as we heard from Serbia about adoption rates really spiking, did you see a similar phenomenon after COVID when people realized that they couldn't go in person, that they had all these other services available to them?
Yes, so actually, I would say that we had two areas of the dynamic development of the number of users. So one of them is Citizen solution that I've mentioned before, like a mobile application that we have launched. But the other kind of solution that we've been introducing at the mass scale was so-called trusted profile, which is identification mechanism for the citizens, which we decided to build in the public-private partnership with the banking sector in Poland. So there are two key solutions that are based of say, a digitalization in Poland. And what I can say about the identification mechanism that we have implemented between 2016 and 2019, the numbers grew from, let's say, 300,000 to 4 million. In 2020, during the COVID times, it doubled, and this year, from January till July, we have another 3 million of users. So altogether, we have 11 millions of trusted profiles in Poland already registered and active, which is close to 50% of the citizens, which is a big success if you take into consideration, that children do not create them, and there is also a big group of people who are digitally excluded. So basically, nearly every other Polish person, Polish citizen, has a trusted profile created. This is an important thing because it allows you to log into any kind of public services in the country. And the mobile application that we've been discussing is already in the wallets of 3 million people in the country, which is also quite a big achievement. And the numbers are growing every day. So basically, we have people registering themselves, creating the ability to log into all the systems in a consistent way. Plus, the number of people who are quitting from the usage of traditional paper documents to have the digital wallet, which, by the way, yesterday started to serve also the functionality of the COVID vaccination, which is, a very useful thing for travel in Europe now.
Absolutely. I have a problem, though. I'm American, if you can't tell by my accent, living here in the UK, and I was lucky enough to be vaccinated early on in March. I got my vaccination in the United States. Here, there is the COVID passport, but because I had my vaccination in the US, even though I provide the folks here in the UK, the NHS, with proof of that, I still don't get the passport. So that's where, something outside of the process ends up being difficult for somebody like me. I want to just drill down on one part, though, because given all that you have brought online, all the digitization, you've undoubtedly experienced so much automation. When you look back at your career and your time doing this automation for government services, what's the piece of automation that stands out to you as an aha moment, something where it really worked and it just made it seem like magic? What's one of the best use cases you've seen in the wide array of experiences that you've had?
Well, I think it's a little bit tricky question because I can tell you about my revelation moment, given the fact that I was spending my previous career with the private businesses, and we always were challenged, to create solid business cases for the implementation of a specific services that are helping, the business to run, earn more money, provide the return on investment, etc. So my aha moment was when we started to calculate nearly any public service in the country of 38 million people, it turned out that whatever you do, whatever you automate, even if you cut 5 minutes from, like half an hour long process, you are going to earn, enormous amount of money in savings. That's just phenomenal. Whatever you do, you are going to save tons of money, and years of time of the public servants. So it's really important to understand that in the public administration, every service is having a granted return on investment. But now, if we speak about the achievements and something that I'm most proud of, it is really the basic thing. This is the basic things, such as ability to log into all public services with one login only, so that you don't need a password, a separate password and login, the other one that you have for your bank, for example. That's a big achievement that we have introduced, that the people are very happy with. I mentioned 11 million of people who created that by now, and the numbers are growing. I think it really opened the door for the public administration in the digital form, and that's something that we are particularly proud of.
Well, savings, savings, savings. It's a theme that we hear over and over again with automation. I really want to thank you for your contribution. Stay there. We do want to bring you back with the rest of our panelists to talk about, to answer rather, the Q&A. So we'll see you in just a little bit. For the moment, I want to bring in Lukasz Zecha, founder and managing director of Textra. And there I see you right there, and you even have your microphone on. We're getting better and better at this each time around. Thanks for joining. I'm very curious. Just give us a little bit of background on your role and what Textra does, and the role that automation plays in digitizing these services for the public sector.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Samuel. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for inviting me. First of all, I was let's say unmuting myself because we all know that, let's say, you are on mute is the most frequent phrase in 2020, which is in a digital let's say area, and this is not something that will never happen because of or without the COVID. And the COVID is I would say, the biggest accelerator of the digital transformation, at least from the perspective of the vendor, because we in the Textra, we are delivering the digital transformation to the private, but as well to the public sector. So from our perspective, what we have seen in last, let's say, 18 months or let's say 12 months plus was the, let's say, huge appetite of, let's say, all organizations for, I would say, very dynamic, let's say, piloting of the new technologies, or starting to do the things differently. So this is what the situation is, and I have to say that I lost the question now.
Well, no, my real interest is how you play a role exactly. I mean, what are some of the processes and best practices that you see in terms of digitizing all types of records and processes for the public sector? I'm really interested in those best practices so that people can walk away thinking, here's what I could do better for my country, my department, my sector.
Yeah, so let's say we are not differentiating much between the, let's say, private and the public sector, because we are using the technologies, most likely the RP technologies, UiPath technology, which is looking at the work from the process perspective. So we are industry agnostic, but looking into the processes. So at the end, it doesn't matter if you do have the processes in HR, in IT, in all the management, finance and accounting. It can be, automotive company. It can be, the, let's say, regional authority of some country. We are looking into the processes. And from this perspective, and as well from the perspective of the, let's say, number of the applications, for example, here in Czech Republic, and I would say it will be the same in nearly all the governments, we have something between 4,000 to 8,000 systems and the applications, which the government and the regional authorities or the municipalities are using in serving its citizens. So from this perspective, this is the ideal, area or playground for the solutions like RPA, like UiPath, because all these, let's say, applications has to, let's say, work together. The people are like the glue between the applications and systems, and just making the, I would say, the interface between the systems and entering, validating, organizing the job, which can be sometimes very, very routine. And of course, the robot or the virtual, let's say, employee can do it much more better and with the higher efficiency. So, um,
Well, I'm curious, given the role that you play, and you're able to look at the public sector while not being a part of the public sector per se, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges within the public sector to make this type of digitization possible? What are those challenges?
well, I would say that there is still some kind of lack of skills in the sector. Sometimes the visionary or the, let's say, digital attitude, which should be somehow triggering the new things or the changes, how to manage the processes or just the environment at all. And I would say, and of course, the there is a not, I would say that to be scared of the change is normal everywhere. It's a normal thing. So there I would say the two aspects. I would say that first aspect is that there is, let's say, low awareness about the possibilities, how to manage it, how to start, how to implement, how to, let's say, maintain. And the second thing is that, let's say, they are scared sometimes of this change because they are not informed. They are not aware that it will not impact their, let's say, working place, but it can be some kind of benefit which will help them to increase the efficiency and even work better, smarter, for the citizens, for the business, etc.
And when you look back on the wide experience that you've had and the many different ways that you've automated so many different aspects of this, what is the facet of automation that most stands out to you? An example or a use case where automation really made not just all the difference, it completely transformed a process that had been in place before.
Well, because we are speaking about the public sector, and I think it was mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. We are the one of the, let's say, first companies helping to automate the public sector here in Czech Republic, and our first project was for the regional authority of Moravian Silesian region. Which is one out of the 14 regions in the Czech Republic, serving to nearly 1.5 million of the people, of the citizens. And they started with the, let's say, automating the process for the free boiler, it was free boiler grants or something like that. And we helped, to automate, the processing, validating, and responding to nearly, let's say, more than 40,000 applications, for the region. So which really helped, the processing of the applications. There was the quick reaction and, let's say, zero errors, to the citizens. And of course, the huge, I would say, benefit, to the organization. We decreased the, I would say, cost, of the processing, and of course, delivered the, I would say, very good experience to the citizens, which were applying, for such a grant.
Yeah, when you hear big numbers like that and you think about the amount of humans that would have to be involved with something like that, you really see the scale of automation really quite clearly for the public sector. Okay, well, Lucas, again, I'm going to ask you to stay right there. We're going to bring you back for our Q&A shortly, but in the meantime, I'd like to bring in Boris Koprivinkar. He's CEO in Singular Consulting and the former Minister of Public Administration and Deputy Prime Minister of Slovenia. Thank you very much for joining us. I assume that you've been listening in on these conversations, and I'm just curious for you to give us a broad picture of where you see Slovenia standing. And we've heard about these, what I would say, great success case with Serbia, some of the challenges to catch up in Romania. Where does a place like Slovenia fit in the scale of what we see going on for public sector automation? Boris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on this panel and for inviting me. And as I'm listening panelists before, I see that basically we have all the similar problems, but how we are solving them, in which order, with which intensity, it's of course sometimes a little bit different. I would just say that when I was listening to the Serbia, where the COVID crisis really boosted the development and the use of services. Romania, when they started to use these services to open the services to be equal approachable to anyone in very short time. Poland with the problems with the silo organized government and solving EID, sharing EID, and so on, and extra like private provider also for public services. It's very similar also in Slovenia. I would only say that I was very pleased because I was blessed with being responsible for governmental digitalization for 4 years in the government. So I know how hard we tried to use the services. It was not a problem to build the services because we already had, before the crisis, for 10 years, specialized portal for e-services for citizens, specialized portal for businesses, all oriented, and we did reorient them not based on the organizational structure of government, but on the life events or life situations in business and in personal life. We, like Serbians, we already had 10 years ago, for example, a proactive service where you get already from the government your tax announcement pre-filled. And in 95%, I estimate, you just say, okay, it's pre-filled, it's full. Now we introduced the same in the social services. We had a very successful strategy of green reference country, which build it up the public awareness of how important the digitalization is, because it's a pen of the modern society. If you don't have effective digital solutions, you don't have no business, no education, nothing else.
And I don't want to interrupt you there, but I want to just really drill down on that then. So how did Slovenia do that? How did you do this awareness campaign? Was it successful? And what do you wish you could have done differently? Even more of it, I assume. But what type of methods do you use? Is it just advertisements on bus stops? What's the actual way that you go around having to convince the society of something that's really so necessary?
Shortly, we face the problem of cooperation and silo structure, the problem of sharing, using the same solutions, sharing the data, low digital skills, and of course, being afraid of any changes. So what we did is we had this green reference country strategy in which we involved all 4 main pillars. So NGOs, businesses, academia, and government as equal partner. We've been talking a lot about the digital solutions, not about the concept, but about the practical benefits for the citizens, practical benefits for the businesses. For example, I like to say I have my business now for, I don't know, a little more than 2 years, and not even once I went to any kind of office to do any kind of things that I need to do for my business. To register, to change, to pay taxes, to, I don't know, arrange social benefits and so on. So always starting from the point, what's in it for me from the citizens and businesses point, not what's in it for the government. We always ask our questions, how the citizens will benefit and why they should like it. And when you use this approach, because we are selfish creatures, people like we are functioning. So if I see, okay, it's good for me, then I'm interested. If I say, well, you have to try harder because it's good for the country, it's good for the government, I don't care. It does not work. It works only from
self-interest is always interesting to people.
Yeah, and that was interesting and very practical. And on the side, of course, government saved a lot with the automation. For example, only with the cross-checked with the AI-based proactive system for social benefits, we save over 100 million euros per year, only on different kind of abuses or hiding data and something like this. So it's very practical, but this should not be the main goal. The main goal is your services will be very approachable to you personally, and then people like it. Then people use those services. The similar was with the EID. We couldn't reach 25%. Even we send the students on the administrative units to pull the people out of lines and say, lady, can we try it online and do it, set things. Very slow progress. During the COVID crisis, it boosted up. Now you can get EID when you go for vaccination, you apply for the EID at the same time, for example. This is what we do, very practical.
Well, I'm glad to know that there are silver linings from such a terrible, terrible plague that we have faced. Boris, I'm curious, we have just a little bit of time left with you, but of course I want you to stay on for the Q&A. So if you had to have 3 pieces of advice for anybody looking to digitize their public sector, looking to push automation in their public sector, what would be the 3 top tips that you would give any country, any department, any sector looking at your success, Serbia's success, and the other folks that we've talked with today?
First, when you talk about the digitalization, use analogy of a car. I don't know how my car works, but I know how to start it, drive it, and stop it. So this is the same with the technology. Don't explain technology, explain the benefits to the people. One thing. The second thing, we were very successful because a few years ago we started to build, and in quite short time we built it so-called governmental cloud. We joined the data and the services of the whole government and key governmental agencies, about 40 entities. If you have this, all the data and services in one basket, then it's very easy to compose new interactive, interoperable services. And the third thing would be...
I just want to pause you there. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what you're saying. So you're saying that all these digital services need to be built in the same place? I mean, when you say centralized, what exactly do you mean by that?
I mean that there should be an open central access to the data and services. It does not mean that they all sit in one server. Even we did it so in our case, but it means that you have to access them through one point and through one data sharing mechanism. That you don't negotiate every time with different ministries and agencies to get to their data, but the data is already there according to the right to access the data. If data is public, it's public. If it's private, it's private. So, but data should be reachable to those who are entitled to reach it. And the last thing that I think it's very important, don't start with the technology. Start with the organization, because digitalization is like nerve system. A nerve system have to be centralized. If you have decentralized limbs, for example, you have so-called Parkinson's disease, I guess, or something like this. So it has to be centralized. It has to be central coordination for the digital development. And in my case, that was the key point, that really development started to boost up, because there was one point of decision. If you didn't get the approval of the so-called strategic council for the digitalization for your investment, there was no investment. So you had to ask always the same point. And this is, we reacted very fast, and this is how we start to build the synchronization of the whole digital system, even if it can be technology agnostic, but it has to be one point of the coordination.
Well, I think these are incredibly interesting insights. And of course, as we hear so many times and forget too often, don't explain the technology, explain the benefit. That has to be one of the key takeaways for everybody. Boris, I want you to stay right there. I want to bring back everybody. I want to start opening this up for our Q&A. People have already been submitting their questions. So I just want to go straight to those. And here, one that we had from the very beginning when we started our conversation: how to focus on the systematic changes related to incorporating automation long-term when a situation like COVID brings an urgent need to speed up digitization. We have seen a number of processes that had to be implemented within weeks alongside longer term changes. How to do those two processes at the same time and do them well. So systematic changes in a short amount of time. That's difficult. I mean, I think when we heard from you in Romania, Ms. Cortes, how do you balance something like that? Let's start with you, and then I want to hear from Marta on that. You're both on mute, so be prepared to unmute. And maybe go ahead. Marta, I see you're unmuted. So let's start with you. So that's a hard peg to square. You're trying to create something square out of something round in a way. Long term is long term. So how do you address a long term problem in a very short time is essentially the question, Marta.
Well, as I said previously, so the crisis just boosted not only the use and the adoption of digital services, whether they were automated or not, but also boosted the understanding and awareness of the public servants and the government agencies that this is something that will happen eventually. I mean, sooner or later, better sooner than later, of course. So I totally agree that, you know, we do have some challenges in this process, and both on the side of the government, where people are afraid that they're going to lose jobs because of that, and we have some cases over here where they were reluctant to do that. Even and the other side is that citizens are reluctant to use them. Like I just arrived today, like 1 hour before this conference from Dubai, when I was at the airport and saw two very interesting things. One of them was that digital green certificates work from many people from many countries, and the second one was that people are reluctant to use automation. It was the passport control. So there were two streams. You can use the automation to identify yourself. So you just, take the computer, the robot takes picture of you, and then you scan your passport. And there was a gate where there are real people there, checking your documents. And I was just seeing the streams. 90% of people went where there is a servant over there, so it is really difficult to achieve that acknowledgement and adoption of technology. But we have to show the results and the benefits of it, and the customer experience is the key word here, as Boris said. So if it is easy, and if I try once with the help of some assistant over there, and it proves that it is easy, then the second time I will have no doubt to use it because it's faster. So these are the things that we have to focus.
And Lacra Miora, I don't know if you can unmute, but I want to put that question to you. What are some of the principal ways that you found to implement short-term, long-term changes in the short term?
Yes, we had this to solve in very short time to solve the problem. We were based on the experience of only 3 people inside our agency. So we used their experience, which was not so big, but especially their enthusiasm and the goodwill and the work they had done in that period. And in very short time, I said it was a matter of leadership. Around the 3 people, we succeeded in a very short time to put other teams, especially for the 42 agencies we have all around the country, and to make them to work for the people in that difficult times. And of course, the population was very keen in our situation. Even we had difficulties because they couldn't fill in the forms, the intelligent PDFs. They were not accustomed with that, but we had some people behind to explain them online, of course, because nobody meet with anybody at that time. So I think the people working on that was the key for us.
And
on
Boris,
automation simultaneously.
thank you for that. Boris, I can see that you're wanting to jump in on this conversation about how to achieve something that's generally speaking long-term, but all of a sudden becomes a necessity short-term, Boris.
Well, in our case, it showed very clearly that if you prepare your system, that they are with the neutral technology or technologically neutral, that your legal frame, that's very crucial, is quite open and ready for digital, so that everything physical is recognized in the same value as everything digital, that you have strong public-private relationships, because when you need a fast development, you need partners that they already know you, and they can start to develop very fast on very clear principle, on already prepared legislation. And the last thing that's most important for me, you have to be ready with the open, shared, accessible data. If you don't have data, you don't have any services. And when we talk about the automation, my experience is I was, as a Minister for Public Administration, responsible for debureaucratization. And we tried to simplify the legislation. It does not work. It does not work. No one wants to give away some kind of a certificate that they need it and so on. But you can do a lot with the automation. So you don't simplify the legal procedure, you just do it very fast with in the robot style. So the effect on the end is basically the same. It goes very fast, and it does not involve my time and the effort and my nerves to fill some form, because it can be done automatically. And these are the triggers that works.
Great answer, Boris. I think the next question, Eric, I'd like you to start by answering first. So if you want to unmute, I'll read what the question is that we have from one of our viewers. We have been focused on citizen services, but there is a lot of internal processes like procurement and finance. We heard our friend in Serbia talking about the procurement being a challenge. What are the lessons here? How to make sure these run smoothly without citizens ever knowing back office processes? So procurement and finance, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this, Eric.
Well, that's not an easy task to achieve, obviously, if we speak about the public services. But I would say that our experience from the time when we've been working on these challenges indicated clearly that if you are taking into consideration the most important factor that you need to deliver, and ultimately this is, say, citizen experience, not necessarily customer experience in this particular case, there are always an options to simplify what is most important for the user is, I mean, the user interface, that they are accessing the public services through. So at the times, one of the biggest challenges that we have was how to deal with the fact, that we have on one hand a necessity to deliver the simplest possible user interface to every person using the public service, and on the other hand, hide all the complexity behind, and whether this is touching the procurement, finance matters, or any other aspects, that are, and in my opinion, they will be complex to some extent, for at least foreseeable future. And this is something, that we need to somehow bake into the process. So whatever we do in the process of the development of the public services, digital public services, we should think of keeping the user interface, the citizen interface, as simple as possible, and everything else needs to be happening, in the kitchen. And sometimes it means that the team working on the user interface is one team, and there is a big team sitting behind to make sure, that they can simplify those things, and they can hide it, from the citizens, from the users of the public services, really.
Hey, Boris, I could see you wanted to jump in quickly. We still have a few more questions to get to in just 10 minutes left, but you wanted to add something, I could see.
I just spent already too much time. I would just say on procurement, what we learned is don't do public procurement with technical definitions. You have to tender the problem or the area, not the solution. And this is how we learned that then you transfer the burden of innovation, of development, of optimization to the provider of the solution. And it works by the law. It's according to the European law. So in the procurement field, tender the problem, and that's legal procurement process, and then you select the best solution for your problem.
So don't publish the solution you're looking for, publish the problem that you have.
That's it. That's it.
Right. And maybe if I can jump in just for a second to tell you a funny story, because we had a big trouble, to define one of the tenders where we wanted to bake in the success criteria, which is the citizen happiness index at the end. So you don't think about the solution, you don't think about the service itself. You want to make sure that the citizen is happy, and believe it or not, but it wasn't that easy. We had a lot of troubles with it, but this is exactly the direction we should think about. What are we going to deliver? Of course, there is a certain function, certain service baked in, but ultimately we want to make sure, that the people are happy and they are using our services. They are, efficient, easy to use, etc.
Well, I want to just get to our next question because we have less than 10 minutes left now. We've talked about huge savings here a lot, but there are many costs implementing automation solutions as well. How to find this money to invest to later benefit from it? I assume that's been a problem that everybody has faced here. I'm not sure who to put this to exactly, so raise your hand if you'd like to speak, but you must need money to put together these systems. So Arek, pick back up on that. Well, how do, especially in a time like COVID, when all of a sudden revenue from government is going down, how do you get that money that you need so quickly? Unless you have the forethought the way that Serbia or the way that you were talking about in Poland did. I assume you're going to say something about forethought.
In our case, just in the short words, we've launched a separate stream that was working on securing the funding. And in our case, the answer was simple. Since we couldn't find enough funding in the national sources, we actually looked for the EU funding. And we started to work as every other beneficiaries of the various projects. We ramped up the teams that were actually formulating the projects and applying for the EU funding. So we were putting some money from our budgets, adding the money from the EU funding, and then we were able, to fund a lot of crucial projects. That was our way to go. But it was like a separate stream running alongside with all the other activities that we had in order to make sure we can actually do something. The national funding was insufficient in our case.
And Lucas, I saw you nodding your head in agreement. I mean, when you're working as a vendor with clients, do you often, have to say, okay, well, look at government funding?
First I have to say that there are, let's say, two very, very different streams. Of course, one for the private sector and second for the public. So in public, I have to say that, of course, the EU money and, the grants are, I would say, the huge accelerator of the changes here. And at least from our perspective, I would say that, the most of the projects are happening only because of this fact. So definitely yes.
Got it. And Boris, I could see before we go to the next question, I see you had one thing to add.
Just shortly to say, there is a lot of EU money and the new financial perspective even more, but what we need are good projects to apply for the money. The government has money, there is a lot of money because of the COVID crisis, willing to be invested in the digitalization. And my remark would also be use the service models, because then you avoid the huge in-front investment, but to protect yourself from a vendor lock-in in that kind of business relationships with the government, you have to protect and keep accessible all your data. So you can use the service models if you really can access your data, then you're on the safe side.
Boris, I want you to start by answering this question as well, because you touched on it somewhat earlier. How did these countries implement pardon me, I've said this word too many times now, the automatization. How did they find partners for digital automation and hire them or created it themselves? Okay, so Boris, you had just been saying, tell people your problem, not your solution. So what is that balance of going to the private sector or trying to do it within the government?
I would say very simple, but at least by my experience, we were very close to the businesses and we exchanged the opinions about how to direct the digital development and so on. So you have to establish the relationship that you know each other. We even started the programs of exchanging people between the public and private sector to understand each other better. you can never, or it's usually, you cannot hire and pay very good digital expert in the government. So you are always dependent on this, that you will have to hire development services outside. So the relations would be, you need to keep the orchestrating role. You never let the orchestrated role to the businesses. But when you know what kind of a problem you have or what kind of a solution you need, then you let to the private sector to do the development, I don't know, the innovation, and you have to work very closely with them. And that's the only way. If you want to have a strong governmental development IT company, it usually does not work.
Well, Andrew's there on screen, so that can only mean one thing. But really, for me, so many of the takeaways here, I just like to say, start early the way they did in Serbia and Poland. Market to the people, tell them not how the technology works, but how it's going to help them. And again, it's also about how you keep those lines between the private market and the public sphere open, as Boris was just telling us. So from London to Poland to Czech Republic, Serbia, Romania, Slovenia, and to you, Andrew, thank you very much. And Andrew, I'll let you take back over. Oh, Andrew, you're suffering from the famous line that we were talking about earlier.
Yes, I just realized that. Thank you very much, Sam, and a huge thank you to all the experts for this excellent discussion. We could be talking for a very long time. I think the topic is extremely interesting, and we've heard a lot of different lessons here. I would like to also thank our partner UiPath for joining us on this occasion. Before we go, I'd like to say that this expert session will be followed up with a white paper that we will release in mid-July. We will send you details on how to obtain your copy later this week. And remember to visit emerging-europe.com for news, analysis, and research related to our region. Also join our programs, The Future of Emerging Europe Towards 2030 and Tech Emerging Europe Advocates. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.